Welcome to I Play, Therefore I Am. In our conversations with extraordinary games industry professionals, we discover their unique career stories, and we also find out about their personal development and philosophical journeys.
This podcast is a co-production of MediaNet Berlin-Brandenburg and Now Media, and brought to you fresh from the games capital Berlin, as part of the program MediaNet Games International.
I'm Simon.
I'm Florian, and we will be your hosts for this program.
Gaming meets philosophy. I play, therefore I am. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to I Play, Therefore I Am. And I'm Simon, normally not the intro guy, but today for a special reason, it's me. And with me, as always, my co-host Florian. Hello, Florian.
Hello, good day, sir.
Hello. And I'm the intro guy today because I did a guest invite for once, and I have the honor of welcoming a friend, a colleague, man who's introduced himself to me.
A kindred soul.
A kindred soul. He once introduced himself to me as philosopher and grandmaster facilitator.
Yeah.
Something that inspired me greatly.
Adventurer, philosopher, facilitator.
Rider of the waves of life and games and everything it has to offer. Welcome to the show, Garvey.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Simon. It's really good to be here. And with you, Florian, as well. Thank you for having me.
Great pleasure.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I thought I'd invite you because this podcast has been a very nice source of just great conversations. And I was like, I know some cool people. who do I like? You know, because usually Florian does like the guest invites from the industry. But now we're in this project where we're also interested in some international US things, all directions. So here we are. And I want to hear about your great story, or we want to hear about your great story of how games changed your life, maybe some of the times that we shared, and many lessons that you've learned on a very unique journey, I would say. Maybe you can start us out for now with what you're doing now. You're at Nodwin.
Sure.
I know you've spent a lot of time recently working on gaming, esports, and universities. So maybe you can give us the now, and then we can get into some stories.
Absolutely. So I'm currently at Nodwin Gaming. It's an international company based out of India. I would say it's probably the biggest gaming company, esports and gaming company in the world outside of state-backed companies. But nobody's really heard about it in America and the West. We've just started slowly expanding out from South Asia. We have companies in Europe, Africa, Southeast Asia, South Asia, America, Latin America. So I think that fits really well. So I'm the head of education and government affairs. And I focus mainly on scholastic esports, gaming, creator economy. And really the purpose of that is to create a fun, engaging way for young people to contribute to something and learn valuable and transferable skills. So we really focus on using gaming, esports, the creator economy, content creation to teach these really valuable emerging media skills, digital literacy, digital upskilling, things of this nature. And esports, gaming, creator economy is simply the vehicle in which we deliver this really, really compelling and useful information. And I like to look at what the core competencies of people involved in esports, gaming, so on and so forth is, and where those skills would also be valuable. So when the students come through middle school, high school, through university, through my program, when they graduate, they can be involved in esports and gaming or create content, but they can also get a job at Coca-Cola, Ford Motor Company, whatever the case may be, because these skills are really valuable in the 21st century. So I focus really on emerging markets. So I have a real core focus in Southeast Asia. I'm currently based in Manila, Philippines. So Southeast Asia, South Asia, Eastern Europe, Latin America, Africa, because I think one of my core philosophies is to do well and to do good. I don't think that a lot of people realize what the difference is. To do well means that you put food on your table. To do good means you're helping others have that opportunity as well. And with capitalism, it's usually a choice. There's usually not an and, it's an or. You either do well or you do good. And I think that with this kind of program that I run, and especially working with governments and getting government support for these programs, it's a really good way to do well and do good. So I did it for 8 years at Twitch. So I created the first ever student education program for Twitch and Amazon. Worked really, really well. And I came to the point where I was saying, okay, I'm doing well and doing good. Where can I do the most good? And this is why for the past maybe 4 years, I've been focusing solely on emerging markets.
And can you tell us what this program looks like that you're running now? What
Sure.
can a student expect, or what's happening there?
Absolutely. So I sum it up by calling it the 3 C's. And as you know, with the birth of esports, it was community driven. It was community sourced. So community, it should always be first and foremost in anything that we're doing. Even at Twitch in 2013, 2014, when we established the partnership department, we understood that we were just a platform. Who people were coming for was individual content creators. And the content creators knew the community was supporting them using our platform. So in the beginning, we focused on supporting content creators because that was the best way to serve our community. We doubled down on that by, for the most part, and Simon, you know firsthand, is we hired for the partnership team contributors to communities in support of a space on our platform. So community is...
You mean people who were already embedded in these communities partly, right?
Yeah, right. Not only embedded, but they were contributing in some way, shape, or form. Right? So you could be a part of a community and you could be a contributor. Is one more important than the other? Absolutely not, because there can't be anything to contribute to if there's not a community, right?
But those who contribute are usually already leaders and people.
Yes.
I was a streamer, I was a moderator, I was active in the StarCraft scene, and that gave me some profile to be hired at Twitch back in the day. And I think we had many of those kind of community spearheads that were hired at Twitch at the time.
Absolutely. I myself came from the Dota and League of Legends community. I was organizing teams, I was organizing competitions since 2006. And I think that's what attracted Twitch to me as well. So yeah, the 3 C's is community, competition, and careers. And I think it's a very unique program. So with Twitch Student, I had the good fortune of being able to help universities create the very first varsity scholarship esports programs, grew it out to almost 800 universities in America, and then into 32 additional countries. So the esports component, the competition side of it's already there. But I didn't think that was enough, right? Because it really focused on just the players. So community, we wanted to make sure community is being supported in support of the heroes on the campus, right? The representatives of the campus. But what was missing was appropriate curriculum. So the 3 C's for me was community, competition, and careers. And the careers we addressed through curriculum. And the idea with the curriculum is to have esports, content creation, gaming, subject matter applied to traditional disciplines. So you're never going to see me come out with like an esports management class, right? It will be a business class, but it might have a semester of, digital media management or digital media business through gaming and esports. And if you have these 3 components, which hasn't been done before this program, and I don't really see anybody thinking about it this way, you have projects that's embedded into the curriculum that allow the students to come out of the classroom, be a part of a community, the gaming or esports community, and the community comes together and applies their different skill sets that they're learning in class, whether it's graphics, whether it's communications, whether it's AV, IT, whatever the case may be. They come together in support of the heroes, the teams that represent them against all the different colleges around the world. So it's about experiential learning and participatory culture. And again, these skills, it's only 1 or 2 semesters of esports as subject matter. And then they go back to the traditional line, traditional marketing, subject matter and stuff like that. But it gives a chance for these students to now say, hey, I'm learning this in the classroom year 3. It could really put a shine on a student-made marketing deck for support for a community event, so on and so forth. So all 3 components need to work in synergy. There's no top of the hill. They're all equally important. So with my program, I just want to make sure that you're in the classroom, you have a great community, and that community can apply. And really the goal, what outcomes I'm looking for is not only empowered young people that feel confident in themselves and the voice that they have, but be able to graduate with a real portfolio, with a real resume, with a good cover letter. The cover letter could accentuate the soft skills that are learned and applied to the program. And then what they're applying, whether it's social media management, whether it's marketing decks, they'll have qualitative and quantitative inputs and outputs for a portfolio. So when they graduate, they don't only feel like a young professional, they can present themselves as such because they have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years of experience applying a traditional discipline to digital media.
Fantastic.
Yeah, these are very interesting topics, and it's super nice to talk to somebody who's that deeply embedded in like this field between like this cross between esports, education, community. I think Twitch was a big starter of that, and I can see that basically it was because of you. What I find interesting is that the same applies to games as well. But the education around our, let's call them emerging industries, is always fascinating in terms of if an industry is young, then it's very hard to find people. And in esports, this is a lot fresher. You need people with experience, but there's actually no real path. So you need to build up an education system, or you have people who learn by doing. And this is a very interesting point where a lot of universities, schools start to spin up programs. And from an outside view, for me, it was always very hard to find out and to see which of these programs actually do a good job in helping young people to get education, to get a real degree. And there's always, to my feeling, there's always like these black sheep kind of universities who put buzzwords on education and say, now you can get this esports degree and so on. And usually you have to pay lots of money for this. So can you talk a little bit about this? Like, I think because you are at the forefront of this, knowing where you started at Twitch and how many of these programs you've built over the time. Can you talk a little bit about like the challenges in creating this?
Sure, absolutely. So, I'll take a step backwards. At 2012, I was at a company called Azubu.tv. It was a competitor to Twitch. And
I can't believe you, Garvey, man. I was serious. How was that even possible?
Rest in peace.
Well, I think that'll come in when I talk a little bit about my experiences in Korea.
I'm jesting also.
When I lived in Korea. But, the good thing with Azubu was I had a blank canvas. And I was supporting student clubs running events and student-run tournament organizers like Collegiate Star League. So we actually, in 2012, held the CSL Grand Finals for Collegiate on the top of the Peterson Automotive Museum in downtown LA. And we had the professional team, CLG, Counterlogic Gaming, the whole team, because I was very good friends with them. They came up and did signings and hung out with the students. But, with events like this, you want to really create a life experience for the students. It's not only about the competition. We want them to meet other students from other schools, share their experiences, be able to look back 20 years from now and say, I met you at Peterson Automotive Museum. It was my first time in LA. For a lot of kids, it was their first time on a plane. But the struggles came when we tried to institutionalize it. So I started looking into it in 2014, and Robert Morris University, which was the first ever university. It was a small private institution in Chicago, Illinois. And they came up with the first facility, the first varsity scholarship esports program, so on and so forth. When I launched the official Twitch student program in 2015, I would say it took me almost a year to get a second university to create a program. And I was fortunate enough to work with University of California, Irvine, which was the first public school that created a facility dedicated for the student experience and esports and scholarships for their esports teams. So that was really, really difficult. I must have flown to, in that year, I probably flew to 40 or 50 universities pitching to the administrators with the students. And UCI was the first one. And then the floodgates opened. University of Utah came on, Miami University at Ohio, Berkeley, a little further down the line, UCLA, USC, all these big name schools started creating these great programs. And then the floodgates just opened where there was no more outbound work for me. It was all inbound. So I would just wake up and there'd be 30 emails from 30 universities that want to be a part of the program. So since my workload was a little clearer, that's when I expanded out to the UK, and I was supporting the National University Esports League out there in England, and just started visiting schools, got it going there, and then just slowly started expanding. I think at one point we had 13 countries participating just in Europe. So the tournament organizer I was working with came together in 2016 and created something called the University Esports Masters, which was really great. And the idea behind that was something small leads to something bigger, right? Yeah. And if you keep your eye on the big picture and work through the small details, things work out really well. So the idea was that each of these countries would run their standard 1 year, 2-semester tournament structures, but there would be a grand final where the winner from each country would get flown to a different country inside Europe every year. Yeah. To compete for who the best team in all of Europe was. And again, if you think about this idea of creating a life experience and building confidence in young people and getting them outside of their little square box that life likes to put you in, it was just a really great experience. Concurrently with that is when schools started trying to put together esports degrees and esports classes. And I was not of a mind that this was the appropriate way to move forward, because if you look at the UK, for example, there's a very small esports industry there. How many of these kids are going to graduate with an esports degree and find gainful employment? And then if you stretch out a little further, Italy, Spain actually has quite a big scene, but still, how many kids are going to find a job? So I thought it was extremely limited, and it didn't create optional pathways for students to apply themselves. So I was always advocating for this idea of traditional disciplines, subject matter, esports gaming, content creation, with projects inside of the curriculum that enforce the need for the students to go out and do this experiential learning. Okay, I learned this in the classroom. I have this project. I'm going to work with the gaming community and support the esports team. And that will be my project. So I always thought that was the way to go. Unfortunately, with Nodwin, now I have the ability. Twitch, as much good as they did, there was only certain things I could do that Twitch would let me do. And that all revolved around, of course, content creation. Yeah. So they weren't too keen on me spending time and resources on building curriculums and doing community events. They just wanted the streams. So while it did a lot of great work, again, a school with just an esports varsity team, I think is great, but it only serves a small amount of students. You need community events. You need to empower the community, and you need to give them these career pathways, right? And engage them in the education. Not just a textbook, right? They don't resonate with that. So this was the whole idea. And that's why I kind of left Twitch in 2022. So I was there for about 9 years. And I've just been on a quest now to find people that support this idea of a synergistic program that's good for students, makes parents proud. They understand what their kids are doing. Administrators can get behind it. Teachers feel cool and utilized, respected, and loved on the campus that's delivering this type of curriculum. And it circles back around to my title now at Nodwin Gaming. Why education and government affairs? That sounds kind of weird, no? But the reason is that in the emerging markets, the governments are looking to either diversify their economy or support native creative talent. This is a mandate in probably 80% of the countries that I work in. So go to the government and have the government support. Again, you're not talking esports gaming or content creation. You're talking about emerging media. You're talking about digital literacy. You're talking about digital upskilling, bridging that digital divide. And it's put forward to the governments that I work with in a way of diversifying your economy, supporting your native creative talent, and creating a digital economy.
Yeah. So I think that's a very good point that you ended on, because what I think about when I'm thinking about the topics of esports and education, usually there's this, let's say, divide of you need people for an industry, and esports, if you only take esports, if you are immersed in this, and if you're a younger person, or if you are like us in this from way back, although there's obviously people who are in this for way longer. I mean, you are definitely more than me. But so for me, esports or competitive gaming has been around since I was a teen. But the way of creating an industry out of something that is a community thing, that's a very big step. And for the outside world, or for the normal people, of course, you hear in the news, oh, this broadcast is bigger than the NBA, or so many people watched, and so on. But the jobs in this industry are still like not too many compared to other industries. And we are having actually quite problematic time for esports at the moment, or over the last 2 years. And so it's already at some points becoming hard to find a job, or people being let go. And to give people an education in this kind of like field, and then saying, well, you want students to learn life skills, like professional skills that work in, as you were putting it, in the digital economy overall. And so if, for example, esports were not to be something that they could work in, then they should have skills that are like hard skills, soft skills that work for different kind of jobs in a new digital economy. And esports is part of that, but not the be all end all.
I agree 100%. So what I'm trying to do is really address two major problems. One is a problem I had even at Twitch. You know, the demographic of people that consume content, especially with esports gaming and stuff like that, by and large is a very young audience. At Twitch, I think the average age of our view was 24 years old, right? But how decisions are made in the industry, it's usually much, much older people that get in this little square box together, and they're kind of guessing what tools, products, and services the community and consumers might want. And so my idea was to empower the demographic that we're serving in this industry and get some of them into the room and stop guessing, right? Ask directly to some young people, what tools, products, and services should we offer? And I would say there's a good chance that not only will they know what they want, they'll probably be able to build it once they come through programs like this. So that was like first and foremost in my mind. I couldn't understand how people that were a bit out of touch was driving the industry and was kind of stuck in a rut, right? No fresh
But I mean,
talent.
it's hard, isn't it? If you're so young as an industry overall, then the people who are working in it for a long time and basically started it are the ones with the most knowledge. Of course, they are like, I mean, professionals in the field and through building it, but who told them or who taught them? It's something that grew. And so if those people make decisions, then it is basically what I believe and hope, although there's many people, sadly, who seem not to decide this way, but to do the best for the industry that they've created together.
So I think that the second problem that we're trying to address here is the agility of the digital economy, how things so quickly move, iterate, and change, right? What was good in, 2010 when I was in the trenches with Ralph Reinhardt, the founder of ESL, or Hellspawn from DreamHack, every 2 or 3 years, it's a completely different, business model, outlook.
Yes.
And so you have to be agile, and how best to be agile, but to bring fresh blood, educated, empowered, confident in what they want, and bring them to the table. It doesn't have to be decision making, but you should have a council. And every year the council should change. You know, one group of young people, student leaders from across the country, jump on Discord with the executives of Twitch and have a chat and say, yeah, you know, we heard through the grapevine that you're building this for Twitch. I don't know if I'd use this, but if you had something like this, I would use it every single day, every single minute. I would spend bits on this. I would subscribe to a channel. No.
Yeah, we tried to do, we tried to do it a little bit. I know your point, Garvey. I mean, I just want to give a bit of a background.
The ambassador program.
We tried to do it with streamers as the target audience. I know you're talking about like the general populace of young people in general, but of course there's the problem. Like, so I want to say that in all fairness, like for Twitch, that we there was always an effort to bring our streamers on who were like our users and our young people, but it was always a tension, and it will always be a tension field in any industry. That exactly how Garvey is describing. Well, there are people who are building products, but they're sitting together and they're sort of isolated from the users.
Yes.
And then sometimes there's the startup sort of, what would you say? Not mantra, not lingo, but kind of wisdom, but I don't know if it's wise, that says, or trope maybe, that says, well, funnily enough, the user doesn't actually know what they want. The maker needs to guess and anticipate what the user wants. I think there's a lot of truth in that. But at the end of the day, I'm also with you, Garvey, in that, you know, I love your spirit. And I kind of want to shift gears if that's okay for you a little bit.
Sure, of course.
Because I know your stories and I would love to get into them, because I know that beneath all of this, and it's great to hear about your work, by the way. I think we've worked together for long, but what did I really know about your work, right? We talked to each other, but so it's great to hear some of your results and stuff. Yeah, and I know you care so much about young people, and I think I know why, but I would like you to tell that a bit, because I know you had a bit of a harder time growing up, and I think I always see in your engagement and in your love and in your, well, shining eyes and enthusiasm how much you care about a youngster, and I feel like a big part of that is you caring for the youngster that was once you know, or that you once were. So do you want to take us back a bit?
Sure. I'll close it up by saying,
close it. Yeah.
I wasn't knocking on Twitch. It's the industry as a whole. I think it's a matter of what I perceive as gatekeeping sometimes, but I don't think that I think ill of any one particular company or the industry as a whole. I'm optimistic. I love it so much. And, you know, this leads into what you'd like to talk a little bit about, you know, how gaming changed my life. What skills did it give me? Even if subconsciously, what a profound effect it had on me growing up and maturing me as a person and as a contributor. So I won't get into the nitty gritty, but I grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s in Brooklyn, New York. It was a very rough and tumble time. I didn't really have any opportunities. I didn't have any kind of support, family support, or a strong friend network. But I got into, in the mid 80s, I got into Dungeons and Dragons. And I was a product of my environment, you know, nature, nurture kind of argument. And I was kind of rough and tumble. I wasn't the nicest person. I didn't think of anybody else. But I had a friend from a middle-class family. They had a stable family. They had a good environment. And he seen I was in a bad way. So he invited me to every other week, Sunday family day. And the family day consisted of an uncle driving out from Long Island, New York, to Brooklyn. And they'd all get together and they'd play sessions of Dungeons and Dragons. And I like the idea that I can go and, you know there's going to be food on my table. I could take a shower. I could just relax a bit, not always be so on edge. So, of course, I accepted.
A feeling of home.
A feeling of home, right? A safety bubble, right? A chance to get out of the hectic nature that was my life at the time. So, of course, I accepted. And, you know, being a bit of a troll and being aggressive, I wanted to role play the polar opposite of, you know, who I was in real life. So I rolled a paladin named Garvey. And Garvey comes because my real name is Mark Candella, but I grew up in a Caribbean neighborhood. I had a lot of Caribbean friends I hung out with. They used to call me Marcus Garvey. So I took Garvey and I made Garvey a paladin. and I did it just because I was trolling a bit. But the dungeon master, his narrative, the way he would describe NPC encounters and, the results of quests and the good you had done. And for those of you that don't know, paladins are like the goody goodies of Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like selfless, you're not allowed to own material objects. Your whole life is dedicated to being in service of others, protecting the weak and stuff like that. During the course of these sessions, role-playing, walking a mile in somebody else's shoes, even if just through role-playing, I started feeling really good about the things I was doing for these NPCs and these campaigns. And I remember the defining moment. We went back to a tavern that we had previously done quests in, and the dungeon master role played like, I don't know if you remember the old show Cheers, where everybody knows your name. But there was
I was
really
a bit
good.
too young for that. But
So there's a really
I
good.
know that it exists.
Yeah. So there's a really good scene where there's a guy named Norm, and he's such a good-natured person. Every time he would come into the bar, everybody would raise their glasses and be like, Norm! So he was loved, he was respected, and he basically did that. When I walked into the tavern, everybody remembered my name, and they bought me pints of beer, and it was just such a good feeling. Yeah. So from that moment, I decided to try to experiment in my real life. What if, instead of a frown and a push for people, what if I wasn't so fucking aggressive all the time? What if I actually did small things? I hold the door open for somebody, right? Say hello, have a smile for a stranger passing by in the street. Little things like that. Lo and behold, I had that feeling every time I did something nice for somebody. And that's when I started figuring out one of my basic life philosophies, which is being in the service of others is the finest form of living you could ever aspire to. So I just kept doing bigger and bigger things. I think I played with this group for maybe 3 or 4 years, from when I was 16 to 20 years old. And, I would feel better every single day. People started seeing me on the street, and instead of me smiling first, they would smile first. Little things like that. So this is why I like to be called Garvey and not Mark. Mark kind of reminds me of the darker days that I've had in my life. But Garvey to me is an inspiration. It's an ideal that I could never, ever live up to. But being on that quest to being more like Garvey the Paladin each and every day makes me a better person, makes me more empathetic, makes me think of how I could be of better service to those around me, and it's strangers, loved ones, anybody and everybody. So Garvey, when people call me Garvey, it reminds me that tomorrow I can be a slightly better person than I was today. So yeah, I mean, that's really what was the first benefit of gaming that I ever experienced.
That's really amazing. I have a question for you.
Sure.
So it sounds to me like you sort of LARPed your way, like LARP as in live action roleplay.
Yeah.
You sort of LARPed your way into character change. So this is possible. And does that mean life is merely, but not merely, but like life is sort of a game? Do you feel like is that what that is?
I think that there's a lot of great lessons that if you have your eyes open and you're conscious of this, and again, that's why, esports gaming as a medium in these classrooms, it starts letting you see the mechanics. What's actually going on when you're playing games? Yes, you're having fun, but what more can you take away from gaming in any form? And that's really what drives me now when I play games. I like to dig in the mechanics, right? I'm very technical with things like that. And I also like to see what lessons I could learn to apply to business, apply to my family life, to apply to my friendships, to apply to my work.
Yeah, for me, a very similar thing happened. Well, I have 2 references here. This kind of Garvey LARP that, of course, turned into your life and your name, which I think is amazing. Like when you first told me that, I was like, what the hell? What a guy. Like, that's so great. And I thought about this a lot in my last few years where I was on a sabbatical and kind of also looking for a fresh LARP, like who could I really be? Like what kind of, and it only really works when I'm like everything is possible, and I can just be who I want to be. And if I want to be like a sort of also adventurer, philosopher, I think you had a lot of influence on me with this kind of bravado of, no, I can just be that, you know? I can just, no, you can just give that smile, and you can just put those string bags on those kids and be very happy, and it will make them happy. You know, you can radiate if you have the energy. If the cup flows over, you can pass it around.
Yes.
It's given me a lot in the last few years of deciding what I want my next career step to be, and because I want something unusual, something like you maybe at the time that's far away a little bit or feels a bit ambitious. For you being somebody who's happy, who's not so rough, who's generous and genuine. For me, maybe a bit of ambitious, like sort of career in using my strength, but maybe it looks like I'm not working so hard because it's kind of more my using my being as work, you know, this ambition that I have. I think treating it as this kind of game is almost a prerequisite to generate this faith and the strength in deciding, I can just be like that, you know?
Yeah, so that's one of the things I learned as a role-playing the Paladin, right? Is learn how to fill your cup, but don't collect cups, right? Put food on your table, but don't go in excess. Once you have your cup full where you're comfortable in life, help people see they have a cup and help them learn how to apply themselves to fill their cup. So it's a philosophy called lift as you climb, right? So instead of pushing people down, be content with what you have in life and help others like find their cup, fill their cup. And this is a wealth that, you know, really can't be jealous of. You really can't be jealous of other people and what they have. What is a comparison? It's the thief of joy. But I don't feel any of that. I feel happy for people when they succeed and become much more successful than I am. That makes me really happy.
Yeah.
So, and that's again, role-playing a Paladin, right? You take your wealth from the experience you have with others, positive experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. And maybe one more quick comment on this, that what you said before with the mechanics. I had this with StarCraft too. I don't know if I ever talked about this on this show, but I learned to play StarCraft like an RTS game. I never, like, I played Age of Empires before, but never in a way of actually knowing how to play, like to do an opening and da-da-da. And man, when I played SC2, or when I learned it from day 9, shoutouts.
Nice.
Oh man, so good. It literally changed, it completely rewired my brain. It changed how I saw the world. I was like, okay, so either I can, like the very broad strokes is like, either I can play economy, then I have to defend because I don't have expensive units and defenses, but all my money goes into long-term like probes and pylons, right? Or I can like cut economy here and there, build some gateways, build some zealots, and I have an early force, you know? And just this, when to, like, let's say, explore versus exploit, I think some people call it. These kind of broad strokes, I was like, holy shit, economy, you know? I mean, I was 18, I wasn't thinking about this. And because you talked about mechanics, so that's also like completely changed how I perceived the fabric of living.
And the agility that will give you, because I'm sure each game is going to be slightly different with the way that you're going to go about building economy or having a early game. I'm sure you won't go economy.
What do you mean by agility then?
So if you're playing somebody that's playing, you know, you can't do economy of scale because you're going to have a million things thrown at you before you could start upgrading your units. Right? So you'll have to build a small force to fend off the early game push. So your economy, it might be a bit slower, but slower is better than game over.
Which you have to do because the enemy, in this case, also sacrificed some economy to throw that at you. So
exactly. So this is what I'm talking about, agility.
Stay in balance together.
The agility of the mechanics, right? This is a super important skill to learn, is to be agile. And to take all these inputs in quickly and make decisions based on circumstance, not on routine.
Situational awareness.
Yes, situational awareness. I think it's one of the most important skills in the world to have. It makes sure that you're acting as close to appropriately as possible for each different situation you encounter.
Yes. Flo, do you have any of these kind of like formative gaming, changing your view experience moments?
Well, I think I try to bring up World of Warcraft as much as possible in this podcast. So
yeah, this is your job.
This is my job. So listeners might get bored of this, but no, actually, I'm not sure if I talked super deeply about like the social aspect of it before. It's just, but I think this is something that many people in the world of online gaming know, especially when you are playing with bigger groups of people. And of course, MMOs back in the day, I know Garvey also was a fellow Ultima Online player.
Mm-hmm.
You started to make real connections very quickly with people. And when, I mean, the US is a much larger country, but in Germany still, when I was younger and like getting to know people online through games and them being on the other end of the country, playing with you, and you would never meet them. But then it started to get in this, like we were getting older and the first person in our circle, like having a car and being able to drive and then like driving to meet fellow gamers, fellow guild members, and just like becoming real life friends. And just, it went like on for years and years, visiting them, like going to a wedding and these kind of things. This was always for me something that just made me realize how connections with people work, and like what made me feel a lot secure, and like, yeah, you know, having this hobby of games and gaming and making connections through it. So this is, I think, a formative way of just like, yeah, emerging in the world and connecting with people.
I've loved that. So my best friend, I actually met in 1997 through Ultima Online. And he was also from Brooklyn, New York. And, you know, to this day, he's my best friend in the world. University of Washington also did a great post. And it was a group of friends that I had met playing, I think it was Halo, while they were on campus 15 or 20 years ago. And they have this yearly pilgrimage to see each other and stay in contact. And so there was this great picture from when they were students, and then 15 years later, them on the campus as, you know, older people getting together and enjoying their lives and celebrating their friendship that was formed through a game.
Friendship, love, connection.
Yep.
The true matters of living, and so much to be found in games. How did your life continue after you found a bit of a footing in these D&D groups and in your kind of growing identity as Garvey? I don't know what's next on my list. I have like a general period of being a UPS driver that I know is very formative in your life, but maybe there's something else that I don't know about.
Yeah, so that's really one of the core reasons why I stopped playing Dungeons and Dragons. Is I got my first real job, which is a story in and of itself, the power of storytelling and being a good person and making people smile. So maybe I'll just add that on as a quick benefit to, you know, my experience in Dungeons and Dragons.
Do tell.
So again, I was very poor. I had nothing, absolutely nothing, right? Nowhere to go, nothing to do. So I went applying for jobs, but I didn't have a phone number or an address or anything to put on forms. When I finally did acquire one through a relationship, the parents let me use their address and phone number for job applications. I went to apply for a Christmas position at UPS. You know, they hire temporary help for like 2 months at the end of every year because it's just such a huge surge in shipping for UPS at that time. You know, it's not a full-time job. Well, it is a full-time job, but doesn't lead anywhere. You're just temporary help. So I went to apply for a job on 43rd Street and the West Side Highway in Manhattan. And I walked in and there was a security guard. And he's like, oh, you know, what are you here for? I'm like, oh, I'm here to apply for a job. So he's like, okay, you know, go sit in here and a manager will come out. So I went, sat down, a manager came out and said, what are you here for? So I said, I'm here to apply for the temporary position for Christmas help. He says, oh, we're not hiring that. You'll have to, come back another day for that. So I said, all right, cool. So as I was walking out, I recognized the guy's voice, the security guard, that he was from Ghana. So I stopped and I asked him, he said, yo, how did you know? I said, oh, well, this is where I grew up. This is why, what my close circle of friends are. And they keep telling me about these giant snakes that are out there in that continent. Is there such a thing as like a 20-foot long snake? I was in disbelief. It's like, oh yeah, they're called anacondas and blah, blah. We ended up talking for like 15 minutes, just going back and forth and me telling him my story of why I was there and what I was looking to do and him reminiscing about his native country. And finally he says, what happened? That was really quick. I said, well, I came in for temporary help for Christmas and he said they were hiring for that. He said, oh, I thought you were here for the full-time driving job. I said, well, I didn't even know. He said, yeah, it's invite only by referral. I have a list here of people that are coming. What's your name? I said, oh, I won't be on that list, but it was really nice meeting you, so on and so forth. He said, wait, what was your name? So I told him my name, and he literally physically wrote it on this piece of paper. He says, oh, you're on here. Your appointment is at 1 o'clock. So I said, holy cow. So I went outside. It was wintertime. I'm just standing on the sidewalk for 3 hours. Finally, I go back in. He lets me in. And the hiring manager that came out to get me for the interview sits me down. And automatically I see he's got a J.R. Tolkien book, The Two Towers, sitting on his desk. So I immediately, of course, if you're into D&D, you're going to read all these books, right? And it was one of my favorites.
Of course.
So before you could even ask the question, I started talking about the characters I really liked and like Tom Bombadil and blah, 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 blah. And we ended up talking for like 20 minutes just on the book and the different parts that we found really interesting or stimulating. So finally he says, oh, we should get back to the interview. Do you have a commercial driver's license? I'm like, no, I have a regular driver's license. He said, oh man, we have a training class coming in for a union full-time driving job, but it's in, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks. And he told me it's going to take you at least 6 months to get a commercial driver's license. It's a much more difficult written test. And then to get an appointment to do the driving test, every place in New York City has like a 5-month backlog. So I said, oh, well, I want to thank you for your time, blah, 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 blah. My girlfriend at the time, her father was a Department of Sanitation driver. So he had a commercial driver's license. So he gave me some tips. That day, we went to Department of Motor Vehicles. I took the written test, passed it. The next next day, I called every borough in New York City, every Department of Motor Vehicles to try and get a commercial driver's license driving test. Sure enough, 5 months, 6 months wait. So I said, all right, what else can I do? So I started calling because I remember the dungeon master was from Long Island. So I said, why don't I start calling around like upstate New York and Long Island, right? Because a New York driver's license is a New York driver's license. So I called a bunch and I found a small town in Long Island that had a driving test for like it was like a Thursday. They had a driving test open for like the next week on Tuesday. So I booked the appointment and Tuesday, the father and me drove out. We rented a big truck and he taught me how to drive for 2 hours. Air brakes and this, that, the other thing, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So we go for the driving test and it was she must have been a 70, 75 years old lady that was doing the driving tests. And I'm waiting for the next person. She pulls up in this big truck. She gets out. She's fuming. She's angry. She's yelling at the guy. And here she comes over and she starts yelling my name. I'm like, oh shit. So I went over to her. I introduced myself. I had a nice smile. And as we were getting in the truck, I opened the door for her and I helped her get up into this big truck. Sat down in the car and I immediately just started running my lips, right? I asked her, does she have family close by? She started talking about her grandkids. 15 minutes into the driving test, she's like, oh, make a left here. Oh, park here. We pull over. We're done with the test. I said, look, I know that this is my first time taking the test. I know it normally takes 2 or 3 times before you get everything right. I just want to say I was really comfortable because I was really nervous doing this, but you made me really comfortable. And I really appreciate that. And I hope to see you on my next attempt. And she looked at me dead in the eyes and she said, I don't know why you would say that. She takes her little board out, checks everything off and says, you've passed. So I go back And I call the hiring manager. I said, dude, I've got my commercial driver's license. He says, no. Okay, you passed the written test, but no, you need to actually take the driving test and have the license. I said, no, dude, I just got back from Long Island. I took the test and I passed. He said, what in tarnation? And he put me into the very next training. And this is like pivotal because they only do these training classes once or twice a year. And it's for a very limited amount of people. So it was just like shocked. So that's what got me out of D&D. That's how I got that job. And I still had the urge to do things. So a new game had just came out that was portable. You only needed 2 players, called Magic the Gathering. It was a card game. I really loved the nuance of combinations of colors, spells, creatures, and the ability for me to imagine, like, remember in Star Wars when Chewbacca is playing R2-D2 in that like virtual chess game?
Like space chess.
Yeah, like space chess. So as I'm playing Magic the Gathering, I'm actually imagining myself being a planeswalker. And the spells I'm casting, I'm actually visualizing, like on the battlefield. I got really into that, and I became a competitive Magic the Gathering player. But what I identified I was learning was how to adjust for random number generation, right? So the rules of the game was you could have 4 cards, minimum deck size of 60 cards. So I started playing with, okay, I definitely need these 3 cards, the best chance I can have at the opening hand. So I'll put 4 of each of those cards in. Okay, this card's really, really strong, but realistically, I can't play it till turn 4 or turn 5. Do I need 4? What if I get 2? So I put 1 or 2 of those cards in. And you could adjust the randomness of a card game by adjusting the amount of cards and keeping a minimum deck, the bare minimum, which was 60 cards, right? And I started learning the mechanics of how to adjust for randomness, where it's not so random. So that was the big benefit, besides the creativity of identifying synergies with cards that people might not have seen. So I came up with like one of the very first infinite mana loop combinations, and people were like, wait, what? And I would hit people for like 1 million damage in one spell because of the combination that I had figured out of different cards, artifacts, colors. So there's a couple little things that I took away that really helped me start figuring out things that were very useful for business. 1996, I heard wind of a game that would give me like a D&D experience online with lots of other people, right? The very first MMORPG, Ultima Online. So 1997, I got into Ultima Online, and it taught me so.
Because you're talking years. Can you when was the UPS story?
1990
that you just told?
1991 is when I started at UPS.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 1994 I started being a competitive Magic the Gathering player. 1997 I stopped playing Magic the Gathering and went all in on Ultima Online.
Great. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah. And I was still working for
UPS story in the year of my birth. Unbelievable.
Yeah. So I'm just showing how long in tooth I am, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty old.
I love your stories.
So Ultima Online came out. It was amazing. That's where I really got into the mechanics. And another thing that I learned that's really good for business that I use to this day, I look at what meta is. I look at what everybody else is doing to identify what they're not doing. And then going into mechanics, seeing the combinations of the different skills you can have, I came up with something that, basically made me unkillable through mobility and a very simple spell that was a poison spell that nobody used. But the mechanics was if you had 100 in magery and 100 in poison, the poison that you cast on people would just kill them, right? And it was a very quick casting spell. So I combined that with teleport. So I'd have all these little hidey holes like mapped out in the whole world where I could poison somebody and teleport to get away from them as the poison's killing them so that they don't kill me. And you wanted that because Ultima Online was a very rare breed, right? There was real risk and reward, meaning that if when you did PvP, player versus player combat, if they beat you, they could not only take all of your gear, all of your magic reagents, because there wasn't just casting spell, you needed reagents to cast different kinds of spells. Take all your weapons, but they could also cut your body up, take your head and mount it on their wall, right? So you can go to their house.
They just don't make the games like they used to anymore.
Yeah. So like you can go to a player killer's house, and there'll be a wall of heads, and you click on it, and it'll say a head of so and so, head of so and so, head of so and so.
I'm not a big Path of Exile player, but at least in Diablo, which I dabble in still, you can like cut off people's ears still.
Right.
But I'm not sure if many games still have those kind of features.
Yeah. Those were the good old days. So yeah, that learned me that the deeper I understand mechanics and I understand what people are doing, the more opportunities I have to create my own path. Right? Create something that suits my play style, and again, this is very valuable for business, right? I wouldn't know how to work with governments if I didn't like do my due diligence on every country I work in and find out what are they looking for? How do they go about doing things? How do I approach them? What do I say to them? These are all simple mechanics that most people don't think to do, you know?
I find this very interesting how you describe life. Like through mechanics, knowing that a non-gaming person could also call this mechanics, but would mean something very different because you are talking about it in terms of like a games mechanic and then applying it to real life, which is absolutely. Like, I mean, this analytical brain of yours that breaks down situations and tries to understand the meta of everything. It's very fascinating to listen to it because I think, I'm not sure talking about gamers in particularly, but of course I would say that I'm not quite like that, like to that degree, but I know from talking to people that this is something that people just do because like they want to understand the game. They want to get down to the like very core to the, I don't know, like the understanding basically how everything is made from an outside perspective. That's interesting maybe to talk about a little bit about creating games and like the mechanics in that we had this before when we were talking about the maker and how the audience perceives it. Because this is very interesting to me as somebody who's been playing games, of course, forever in discussions with the point that we had before, like who makes the game and who is it for? How much input should you let the audience give? How much is it your own piece of work, piece of art? Gamers always want to understand, like like they will figure out every single thing, try to break the game, try to go in and like, just fiddle with the parts. But they don't
really apply it to personal development.
Yes.
So the application of what I learned from RNG with Magic the Gathering into breaking down mechanics with Ultima Online, and I think this is probably Simon's favorite story, is while I was working for UPS, I was still quite poor, but in 1997, I stopped hanging out. So I delivered the downtown Manhattan. It was part of Chinatown. It was all the courts, like the Supreme Court, the Civil Court, the Family Court, and a small piece of Soho. I stopped going to lunch with like other freight operators, other truck drivers, stuff like that. And I made friends with a lawyer that introduced me to some of the judges on my route. One was Judge Edwin Torres. He might not sound familiar to you, but he wrote the book Carlito's Way, which they turned into a movie with what's his name?
Al Pacino?
Al Pacino. Yeah. So if you look at a movie called Carlito's Way, that was based on a book by a judge that I used to have lunch with. But I noticed, but I noticed when I went to lunch with them, it wasn't the normal conversations. We weren't talking about spinning wheels on cars and smoking weed or going, chasing girls and these type of things. The conversations invariably always turned back to how their money was earning them even more money, right? So they were all investing in stocks. So just because I wanted to contribute to the conversation, just because I was curious and I'm mechanic based, I went to a pair of brothers that owned a textile firm on my route. And I said, hey, going to lunch with these guys. They're always talking about the stock market. Can you teach me a little bit about it? and I caught themselves give each other like the side eye. And I interpreted it as, who's this blue collar, like poor ghetto kid, like trying to come into this white collar investing stuff. So I caught that with a glance and I said, you know what? Forget it. So on the way home after a 12-hour shift at UPS, I stopped at a bookstore and I bought like a dummy's guide to the stock market. And I read the whole book in like 2 nights. So I got the feel for it. So I started every day reading the Investors Business Daily and the Wall Street Journal. And I'm like, how are people making money with this, right? Because if you could look, a stock might be $70 one day. And remember, there was no real-time quotes. You had to have a stock brokerage account, which was for like the 1% of people in the world, right? You don't have a stockbroker. Otherwise, you'd have to wait 24 hours to the next newspaper to come out to see what a stock did. So I would say, okay, this stock is $70 today. It's $69.99 tomorrow. It's back to $70.01 like a week later. Like, how are people like making money? How are these guys always talking about this stuff? So I did my diligence. I did my research. I was a gamer. I was a tech nerd. So of course I followed all the technology stocks. And the day before I was going to quit, the Investor Business Daily had an ad for a revolutionary new technology that came out about the same time as E-Trade. And E-Trade is, you don't need a broker. You send money to E-Trade. You get an account and you buy the stock yourself by pushing buttons on a phone, right? Buy, sell stock, whatever, for $10 a trade. So that came out, and this Quotrek came out, which was a radio feed directly to the stock market that gave you real-time stock quotes. But something better, I realized, was it also gave you bids and offers. How many people were buying the stock at the time, how many people were selling the stock at the time, and what the volume of the stock being traded was. So I said, you know what? I did all this work. It was a really expensive service to me at the time. It was like $50 a month, which was like, oh my God. But I said, I can't feel comfortable unless I actually did my diligence. So I went and I ordered it. I got it. And I started watching it as I'm, delivering packages and stuff. And I'm seeing that $70 stock in the course of a day would go up to $71, down to $68, and then close right about what it started at. And it was all based on what I noticed was the volume of the stock being traded led to volatility in the share price, right? How much it would move in one day was based on volume. So that's really interesting. So I started setting alerts for when a stock was trading at a certain threshold, and I would watch it. Then I started watching the bids and offers, and you could see based on volume, when the bids and offers start switching, that's when it's going to go either up or down. But nobody had ever thought of this. Nobody else outside of institutions, Morgan Stanley and stuff like that, right? Obviously they had access to that, but they didn't even share that with their clients because their money is on what I call a VIG, right? So you'll go and buy a stock at $70 and they'll purchase it at $69.50 and give it to you for the 70, right?
Yeah.
So this was something that nobody had thought about before. So I'm watching and I'm like, well, people could make money. If you buy 100 shares of something and you make a phone call, you can make $100, which twice paid for a month service of this thing. So the very first trade I made was the only time ever UPS was on strike. So I'm on the picket line on Houston Street and Spring Street. With all the other union guys picketing UPS, and UPS is taking food out of our baby's mouth and blah, blah, blah. And I thought to myself, you know what? I got nothing. I had like $3,000 in the bank, right? UPS has been good to me because I was able to work hard and purchase my first home, but I'm going to be stuck in this rut forever. And maybe UPS is going to fire us all. So I just made the decision. I ran across the street to the only stock that I could comfortably buy 100 shares of at 9:30 in the morning. So I ran across the street, called E-Trade, pushed the buttons, and I put almost my entire life savings into Apple at $12.70. By the time I got back to the picket line, and this takes, mind you, like 2 minutes most, right? You just put your buttons that indicate what stock you want to buy, then if you want to buy it and how many shares, and it's done, right? By the time I got to the picket line, I checked my quote track because now my whole life's like riding in front of my eyes. I checked the stock. It's at $22 a share. What the hell is going on here? I'm running. Mind you, I was only looking to make $1, to make $100. I ran across the street. By the time I could sell the stock, like it was 9:35. I bought it. 9:45. I sold it. I sold it at like almost $28 a share. It just happened to be the day that Bill Gates announced that he was investing $250 million into Apple to avoid his anti-monopoly lawsuit by the government. So I like almost tripled my life savings in one phone call in 10 minutes, right? And hook, line, and sinker, I was sold. So I was doing this with Lucent Technologies. I had a core of about 10 stocks that I had alerts sent for. And 10 or 15 times a day, I would go and I would do this. And I learned how to do it safely. So not safely because I was an ass, but you could do a limit, and a stop, right? So as soon as you buy a stock, to save time, because I was busy at work delivering packages, right? When you buy a stock, you can set a limit saying, okay, if it goes up to this price, it automatically sells. You don't have to call. A limit stop is if it goes under by X amount of dollars, you sell it and minimize your losses. So I would run to the phone, I would buy Lucent at X amount of dollars, whatever I could buy, a couple hundred shares of, and set a limit. If I made the $1, it automatically sold. If I lost $1, it automatically sold. But it was the .com bubble. It never, ever dipped. So I was doing this 10, 15 times a day where I could buy 1,000 shares of the stock. At the time, you could also, and this is the crazy part, you could margin 100%. Margin means borrow from E-Trade 100% of what your account is worth. So if I had $1, I could buy $2 worth of stock, right? The penalty is if you lose that, you don't only lose the $1 you had, you owe $1, right? So it was very risky. I didn't care. I said, look, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and I'm all in. So I went, and every single trade, I would max the account out and margin the exact amount. So every phone call, 10, 15 times a day, I was either buying between 1 and 2 or 3,000 shares of whatever stock I could afford to buy like that. So I started talking to my judge and lawyer friends about this. And they was like, that's an unbelievable story. We never heard of something like that. A week later, one of them came back to me and said, hey, the Wall Street Journal is really interested in hearing what you're doing, maybe doing a story. So it turns out they declined. But in 1998, the New York Times reached out to me and they wanted to do a story. So, I think it was the first ever color picture on the cover of the Sunday New York Times in 1998, a front page, 3-page story on, they didn't even have a term for it. There was no such term as day trading. So that's never ever mentioned. But they did a whole story on me and a cab driver that was doing something similar. And it was just crazy. In 1999, another rule of thumb is if too many people are doing something, you need to do something different, right?
Yes.
You need to do something new. So I felt like too many people were doing it and they were just gambling. They didn't do the research and diligence that I had done, right? And have your own algorithm, because I never mentioned the algorithm that I came up with. Tech stocks, volume, volatility, bids and offers, right? And so I decided to take all the money I had made out of E-Trade. And at the time, you could buy privately owned UPS shares, as many as you want. They could take it out of your check. You could just send them a check, whatever the case may be. So I took that whole lump sum and I bought privately owned UPS stock. Literally within a month, the .com bubble burst and the whole tech market was down 80%, right? Everybody lost everything. UPS calls a meeting and they said, from now on, you can't buy stock. You can't do paycheck deductions. You can't do anything with the UPS stock anymore. So I thought to myself, all right, you know what? At least I try to do something. I might lose it all, but the experience that I had and the confidence it gave me in myself that I could do anything I want, As long as I apply myself and I learn, it was a good experience. And they wouldn't talk about it. 2 months later, they do another company-wide meeting and they announce they're going public. They're doing a 2-for-1 stock share split. My cost went from 36 per share to like 18. And it hit the market at 78. So obviously I cashed out and I basically quit work, took a year off, decided to be an idiot. This is the dark age of Camelot time. And
it's
at
good that
31,
there's always a game time, like connected to the timeline.
Always. Dark Age of Camelot was probably, after Ultima Online, my favorite game in the world.
Yeah.
But at 31, I decided to invest in myself and I went to college. And I took 3 full degrees. It took me 5 years. But I invested in myself and I studied philosophy, history, and political science because I wanted to understand human nature more. Why are people so hateful towards each other if they're just different? Why can't you appreciate differences and see how it complements, right? I'm good at one thing. I'm weak at another thing. Simon's good at what I'm weak at, right? I'm strong at what he's weak at, right? When you think like that, 1 and 1 isn't 2. Me and Simon is 10. So 1 and 1 equals 10. If you think about this complementary synergies and skill sets. But I just wanted to understand a little bit more. Yeah. Maybe you want to jump in there because I could tell you a little bit about what I learned, which I'm applying now to business with Dark Age of Camelot.
I have to say, Dark Age of Camelot never, like, I was too caught up in other games to check out Dark Age of Camelot.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still fascinating to me. Like you said, I mean, there's this whole wealth of stories that you have, but also like these kind of analytical skills that you're putting into from games to business. It feels like there's a very direct connection and translation. And yeah, I think, as I said, many people now in their CVs like have these kind of skills list, what kind of games they used to play sometimes, what kind of roles they had, guild master, organizer, I don't know, analyzing this stuff for a game. I mean, even now, if you're like super into games, there are all these websites now that analyze games.
Mm-hmm.
You can look up everything about like which items to buy, what's the calculation behind this, and so on. And of course, people who apply those skills, they can do this for games for fun,
Mm-hmm.
but they can also do it on the stock market or wherever. So we're back at our initial point of like teaching skills to people that are like applicable in business as well as in games. So yeah, that's just fascinating.
And I think that's...
And I'm also... Oh, sorry, Garvey, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's what the strength of the programs that I put together now in education is. It's more about, enjoy yourself, just understand everything that it's adding to you, everything it's teaching you. So you can have fun and you can have personal development.
Which is about what you said earlier, which is actually a phrase that you're using that I really like to use recently. It's like living life with open eyes.
Yes.
Like if your mind, your soul, your consciousness is open and, well, your eyes as a metaphor for all of that, or your ears as well, you can really look at stuff and perceive it multi-layeredly. So you're not just, well, this is a game, period. This is, I think that's really the ultimate meta skill that I can hear you're trying to like imbue the youth with. The ultimate meta skill to do really anything you want. And I think your story shows it so beautifully, and it's so good. I mean, last time I heard this was almost 10 years ago now. So so good to hear that, you can do D&D and it helps you change your character. You can do UPS and it helps you change, applying your new character to get into the door. So, and then you can use that to get to know new people because you're driving around. And I think this is something that's a bit underrated still, that maybe just fascinates me because maybe I don't see it so clearly, but you can, like, life is very behaviorally oriented. As in, like, if you want to meet a lot of people, you know, you got to go outside, like stupid version. But I think people really, I know some people who are like always leave the house, you know, as business advice or as like getting your life together advice, because otherwise it's just not going to happen, you know. And or if you like to stay inside and you like to game, then make the most out of the people you meet, or give the most to the people that you meet, and just these behavioral. You're on UPS tour. Your ears are open, your eyes are open. Whoops, a lot. There's some. Wait, these people are trading. How does that work? You know, and making really something out of it. That always inspires me. I think there's so much richness to life in every moment. If you know how to, if your eyes are open, if you can pick it up, you're like, whoa. There's not just one thing going on here. There are 3 things that I can understand about this, or 10.
I agree 100%. One of my teachers told me that my skill is connecting dots. So the key in life is to be curious enough and to have open eyes to identify all the dots and then figure out how they actually work together. So I always see it like a painting, right? You could look at a painting. A painting is a composition of many, many different things. So I find beauty in a painting that, you know, a small aspect of it is a moon reflecting on a lake, right? But I also enjoy how the trees set the tone, and the little house and the little boat, and how everything is working together to create this feeling that I'm getting. So it's no one piece. It's how everything's working together to present you the opportunity to feel something.
Do you know, I have a question, or maybe like I want to understand your view on this, because we're talking a lot of opportunities, understanding them. You're describing all these situations that you come into. And of course, there's always, it sounds quite fantastical, of course, on one side. But whenever you talk about a story, you can clearly see the point where you are taking action, you are deciding something, you are adjusting for risk. Also, like figuring out, I will risk this no matter what is the outcome. And I think that there's many people, when I talk about like next steps in life, what to do, changing of jobs, looking for opportunities, whatever, there's many people who I feel like are somewhat frozen or will not pull the trigger. They feel comfortable. I think it's a very human thing. But like for me, it's interesting to talk to people and seeing if people can get the confidence of like, just pulling the trigger, just jumping into a new situation. What's your take on like assessing a risk and also then going for it? And how do you interact with people in terms of maybe mentoring them to take a risk?
Yeah, so I have a really odd methodology. So when something pops into my mind, if my mind, my heart, and my stomach agree with it, I learn the mechanics of it. I do my diligence. And if everything lines up, I go all in 100%. There's no plan B for me. I commit and I commit fully. I don't have regrets, right? If I could have made a left or a right. If I do my little system that I do, some call it instinct, but instinct backed by diligence, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Then I never, ever think about the left I could have taken, right? There's no plan B with me, because any effort that you put into plan B detracts percentage points off your chance of success with plan A. So for me, it's always got to be, I don't know if this might be too rough Brooklyn terminology. I don't know how PG-13 this podcast can be, but there's a very succinct way that we used to say in Brooklyn. I don't know if you want to edit.
Go ahead.
Balls deep is always the correct depth.
Sorry, one more time.
Balls deep is always the correct depth.
That's right.
So if you're going to do it, do it.
Yeah. So that's your methodology. So that's, how do you think, I mean, of course, there's people who are coaches, there's people who train people and mentor people. And I assume since you're that much in education that you have many of these conversations with other people. Like, what do you think is how do you teach people, if that's even possible, or if it's just a personality thing, to like jump?
I think it's about being curious,
let go.
right? Yeah, I think it's about being curious. And
Mm.
again, part of my diligence is another thing that I talked about previously with games, right? What is everybody else doing? And what can I do differently to contribute the most that I can as an individual?
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's where the student program came from, right? I knew there was a great scene going on with students. I knew the industry in 2015 was going in the wrong direction, in my opinion, right? 2014 for me was the golden year of esports.
Yeah.
And things started going downhill right after, because everybody thought they knew everything and nobody wanted to hear anything. Nobody wanted to do anything differently. I said, look, how can I contribute the most to the space that I'm currently in that would have the most benefit to not only Twitch, but for students and teachers, right? Teachers are in a really bad spot, right? They don't get paid a lot comparatively, right? They're not really widely respected by the students or society, and they sacrifice so much. So, like, I wanted to put a program together that empowered teachers, empowered students to be able to, if it worked out for them, contribute to our industry in a way that always kept us agile and where we needed to be to service the community and the spaces that we all love. And I saw nobody else was thinking about this. And I said, look, it makes sense. The demographics are correct. I break it down to business, right? Demographics are correct. This is an unending top of funnel for new user acquisition. Meaning, if you institutionalize a program in a university like Twitch and esports or Twitch student, right? As students are leaving, new students are coming on, and the clubs, the teachers, and the competitive side will draw those new people in, and Twitch will get more end users, Riot Games will get more end users, so on and so forth. But it becomes scalable, right? Because you only need to get the program started. And then the institution itself, the students, the administrators, the teachers, they keep it going every year. As they keep it going every year, new students are coming into it, which are being exposed to things they might not have been exposed to before. So that's the business rationale, right? Of, why I thought Amazon and Twitch would let me do this crazy thing of trying to institutionalize esports and Twitch in universities and high schools. People weren't doing it. I saw the benefits of it. You do your diligence. Does it make sense? Does it make sense for business? Does it make sense for my own personal well-being? Does it make sense to, society as a whole? And every box was clicked. Yes, 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 yes. You can do well and you can do good.
Nice.
And Twitch thought I was crazy. The industry thought I was insane. But perseverance, right? I just went all in and I would not stop. I told you it took me an entire year to get one more university. A lot of people would have been discouraged. You go to 50 people and they all, decline the opportunity. You could start having self-doubt. But I didn't have self-doubt because it made sense to me. My instincts were telling me and my diligence was telling me this is the move.
All right. I think that's a very inspirational kind of moment to start wrapping it up. So,
we didn't talk about China, Korea, Philippines.
We got to do a part 2, Garvey.
Yeah, we have to.
You've got too much wealth in stories, my friend.
So 2006, just as a segue to if we do decide to follow up on this, 2006.
Yeah, do the cliffhanger.
I graduated college and I jumped on a plane and moved to China and lived in China for 5 years and got involved in the Dota scene. And that's what got me into sports, 2006.
That's
and also, I don't know if this is on your public rap sheet, but I believe you were also managing nightclubs.
Yes. So again, curious, right? I see something I don't know about. I have an opportunity to work with people that know more than I do. I do it. So the nightclub experience was great, but I wanted to understand the mechanics of running a restaurant, running a club, what service meant in that space. Because you could take little pieces from different industries and combine them and bring them to a new industry. And maybe this industry has a better chance of surviving.
Yeah.
I was also a teacher for 2 years at Nanjing University.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I taught business and effective communication. Yeah. Half in Chinese, half in English.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was
doing
building
cliffhanger for part 2.
Yeah. Perfect.
You have to come back to us. And now we have a little game that we like to play, which we call Essential Questions.
Okay.
And it shall wrap up this our wonderful conversation. And
Essential
yeah,
question.
it's a few
So I
questions
like
that-
long walks on the beach. I'm
This-
6'1",
this is
200 pounds.
Yeah, yeah. What do you like to eat?
Yeah.
You want us to get that started? You want to hit me with the? Should I hit you with the first
I'm ready.
one? Okay, first one. First one is easy, Garvey. So, what is the purpose of your being?
To be in the service of people.
Wonderful. What inspires you?
To see those that I surround myself do well.
What's a beautiful day to you?
A beautiful day is a day pursuing my purpose.
What is the change that you want to see in the world?
I want to see young people and educators become empowered, be important, be relevant, and be confident in themselves and contribute more to society.
And the obligatory behavioral follow-up, but I think we've talked a lot about it, but feel free to answer. How do you contribute to that change you want to see?
Oh, I think the sum of everything we talked about, right? Just applying myself to neglected areas with purpose and passion.
Yes, sir. Here's an interesting one to Garvey the Paladin. If you would start a new save game in your life now, what occupation would your new character have?
Maybe it's time for Garvey the Bard, right? Be a storyteller, right? And an inspiration, because one person can only do so much. But if one person can inspire 10, and those 10 can inspire 100, and those 100 can inspire 1,000, now you can start scaling this idea of contributing and being in the service of people.
It's interesting.
Great.
Usually we don't have a lot of interjections during these, but I feel like Garvey has a new save game every 2 to 5 years. So I'm not sure if this...
I was about to say that. Yes, yes. And you know, no, that's so funny because I was about to say the same thing. Normally we don't interject, but I have to say it. Yes, man. And exactly, I also really want to say at this point, I think, you know, me quitting Twitch and pursuing, you know, something that I would call like something that was like I could feel my superpower while I was at Twitch, and that's something we haven't talked about either. But I remember a good conversation about superpowers with you, Garvey, on a couch in a hotel room while it was storming outside.
Yes, with Mike Ross.
With Mike Ross, you remember that? Yeah. And the sense of I gotta die and be reborn, and I gotta start a new game with the knowledge I've gained. I can't just go on in the same account because I'm already like level 70 or whatever, you know? I really had this feeling, and I feel like this conversation with you today makes me realize that actually is, well, maybe not surprising amount of knowledge and inspiration did flow from you to me. I think you are a very good mentor to me, and I think this...
You contributed so much to me as well. We had so many great, deep philosophical conversations throughout our friendship, and I feel the same way about you. Really do.
That's great. I appreciate that. I think you inspired me a lot to like be like, no, new game plus. We got to go again.
Yeah.
And I think the story you told today represents that very well. You've got proof and receipts, and you've been starting and restarting. Appreciate that, man. That's. I think this is a Garvey question. If you would start a new save game in your life, what would your new character be? You know, that's just like, you know, this game. Yep. You know, starting a new game. Yeah,
I
so
do
great.
Indeed.
Okay.
I do indeed.
Thank you for that, for living that. You know, that's a true inspiration. Living that.
It's so personally enriching to me. Again, people look at wealth many, many different ways, right? And I think I have a very abstract feeling about what wealth is to me, at least on a personal level. And I'll TLDR it. It has nothing to do with flashy cars or number of bedrooms in a house or how many zeros are in a bank account or any of that. I live a very minimalist life right now. I'm trying to actually remove more from my life to be able to focus even better on the things that I do.
Word. I have a bit of a feng shui thing in my house, and the corner of wealth and the color of wealth is purple, and there's a very nice orchid growing here that's a purple one that's been very expansive in the sun. And I have pictures of my friends, and I thought, well, yes, money is important to do stuff and live, and I feel this now that, kind of my nice Twitch cushion is coming to an end. But for me, the wealth has always been people, no doubt about it. The people you can help, the people that help you, people that you have around, people you can share a laugh with, people you can meet 10 years down the line and things are as of olden times,
Yeah.
So I think that's the true stock market is your phone and your contacts and your letters that you write.
And experiences. Don't sell experiences short, right? Our time at Twitch was amazing, right? We had so many amazing opportunities to meet people, help people, do cool things that weren't being done before. So relationships and experiences to me, I think, are truly what is wealth for me.
Back to the questions, my friends.
Yes, but nice interjection. And sorry for the saccharine content, man. But it's nice.
This is
Come
not
on.
It's nice.
1.1 podcast. This is still 1.0.
Yeah, we have to have a little bit. Okay, so last question of the essential ones from me. Are there books, maybe you can give a top 3 list, books that have changed your life, that influenced you greatly, that you maybe like to gift?
Yeah. Number 1, which is like recommended reading, not recommended, it's required reading for me for students that I work very closely with, is The Alchemist. It's by the Brazilian author
Paulo Coelho.
Yeah. That's really, really important.
Which is about starting a new game, by the way. That's also the other book that made me change.
I think most importantly, what it kind of shows, and you have to read the book, but to me, what I took about it is, which is very important in life, is the journey is as important, if not more important, than the destination.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So a second one would probably be The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I think end to end, you got to remove ego from the things that you do that might be inhibiting you, right? People are so afraid of failure nowadays, but why are you afraid of failure? It's because you care too much about what other people think, right? I always say my life philosophy is I only stress about 2 things in life, and it's the only 2 things that you as an individual have 100% control over. It's the words that come out of your mouth and the actions you choose to commit to. Those are the only 2 things that you have 100% control over in life. So those are the only 2 things I stress about. So, Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck and the removal of ego from your life, I think is truly important. And the third one isn't a book. It's a video that I like people to watch. And it's Simon Sinek, How Great Leaders Inspire. And it's a TED Talk on YouTube. And I think it's really inspirational to think about business, to think about life, and TLDR, it's something called the Golden Circle that he talks about. I won't spoil it because it's only a 17-minute video, but I think the first and the third are the most important. The third is optional based on where you are in life and what you're currently curious about that you're doing diligence on.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you for those. And over to Florian.
Yes. Taking over with a similar list question, which is, what are your favorite games? Also, like a top 3.
In history or that I'm playing currently? I wish with everything I have that a game like Ultima Online would come out again. And did try with a game called Albion Online, which was...
Yes, it's made in Berlin.
Made in Berlin. Yeah. I had some good chats with the founders. I like it because it was kind of built on Ultima Online. And the idea of Ultima Online. but I found it still wasn't there. Like you could loot armor pieces and stuff. There was no set career path. Like you could pick and choose what you wanted to be each and every day based on the equipment you wore. But I didn't like that there's zones that you have to like buffer through. I think that Ultima Online had no zones. So there was never any buffering. So it never disconnected you from the mindset that you were in. So yeah, Ultima Online, Dark Age Camelot. I never got around to telling you what I learned from that, so we'll save that from part 2. But Dark Age Camelot was amazing for finding a purpose in the game and living it through and attracting like-minded individuals to work with and complement each other towards that purpose. And I'm still like a MOBA fan. I love MOBAs, right? So League of Legends, Dota. I'm currently playing a game that's very popular in Southeast Asia called Mobile Legends.
Great game.
Yeah. So,
played it
yeah. But that's what
right
now, Mobile Legends, and another game the kids are playing, the students are playing that they got me into. It's a gacha game. It's Honkai Star Rail.
Oh,
yeah. And
yes. I know somebody who plays that as well.
Yeah, I like the story. I like the narrative behind it, right? Because there's no PvP. It's a one-player game, so on and so forth. But the story's compelling, and the interactions between the characters and the visuals of the game, I just enjoyed a lot.
Yeah. All right. Who is somebody from the games / esports industry who you would like to get to know?
Oh, that's a difficult one. Because I've basically made the past 20 years or 18 years like identifying people and then finding a way to meet them.
Yeah.
Let me
So you will be also an ambassador for this podcast for our upcoming question, but yes.
Yeah, where I am right now, I'm all in. So like, I'd love to meet the leaders of the countries I'm working in and explain how important this is, right? And the way I explain to politicians is good students make good schools make good cities make good regions make a strong country. Invest in youth, invest in education in a way that's engaging and gives them those 21st century skills that allow you to diversify your economy and grow new economies.
All right. There usually is a trap card in this because we give ourselves a little task to connect the person that's wishing to the person that they're wishing for. But we will also hire you now. You seem to know a lot of people, so you will also become a matchmaker for us in the future and connect our previous guests.
Absolutely. I'm at your service.
That's good. Who is someone who you think we should have on this podcast?
So I'd like to start with the most important, community builders. I think Hellspawn, which Simon, you probably know him, right? Christian Lord.
Yes.
I think and we have every other week, like 2-hour philosophical and industry catch-ups. I think he's super sharp. He really cares about the community. He cares about the industry. And he has, of course, a different methodology into the way he goes about things that might complement, some of the things that we discussed today. So I think he's great. Maybe on a contribution to the industry side, you might want to think of Ralph Reinhardt or Jens Hilger.
Reichert, yeah.
Yeah. Those two have been inspiration for me for a long, long time. And the last one would probably be Kevin Lin.
Yeah, I knew you'd say
that. You got to put there. And then I have, like, if you want to see like how things are done in different regions of the world, I think Akshat Rathi, who's the founder of Nodwin Gaming, he's probably the smartest person I've ever met in my life. And he thinks really, really big picture stuff. And he empowers people to find the path to get the global company where it needs to be.
Yeah. All right. And the final last question, where can people find you online?
I'm very, very active on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And my Twitter and Instagram is the same. It's just Garvey NYC, at Garvey NYC.
Mm-hmm.
New York City, of course, right? You could take the kid out of Brooklyn, but never Brooklyn out of the kid. That's a saying, actually. But yeah, Garvey NYC on Twitter and Instagram. But I'm very, very active. I follow a lot of really interesting industry people, along with people that think philosophically.
Mm-hmm.
So you can really tell a lot about the things I'm into and doing by the likes and retweets and stuff that I put on my Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two easiest ones, I would say.
All right.
Great. Garvey, thank you so much for being on. Thank you for sharing your amazing stories. Thank you for having even more, so we can look forward to maybe doing this again. And yeah, that's it. Love you much.
Love you too, man. I appreciate it.
Such a pleasure.
Yeah, I appreciate what you two are doing. I think these kinds of podcasts with people with different ideas and the way they live life and, want to support the industry, I think is really, really important. I'd be very happy to recommend to students to go through your catalog and make sure that they keep up with what you're doing.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on. Very inspiring episode.
Well, I got to say the pleasure really was all mine. And Simon, you already know, if I can get 3 minutes to rub together with you, I'm super, super happy. And I hope to be able to come out to Berlin soon and, have a couple of days that we can just reminisce, get to know each other better. That's for you, Florian. But for Simon, reminiscing and our philosophical chats, I always miss. There's not too many people that don't think philosophically. They're either transactional or creative, and they're both really, really useful. But I like to get a little deeper into the meaning of stuff.
That's what it's about.
Nice. Maybe you are thinking about coming to Gamescom, for example. So
I probably should think of that. I went to Gamescom every single year for like 10 years, but I haven't been to one since the pandemic because if I travel, I want to go and do my scholastic and education work.
Yeah. Well, we will see.
You're invited.
Thank you.
Thank you. And see you next time.
Yes. All right, guys. Have a very nice day. And thank you for inviting me on this. This was a great time just catching up with nerds like you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
Bye-bye.
All right. Ciao, bello.
Ciao.